If you're into your classic Volkswagens like we are, you might be aware of the fact that the Bus and the Beetle, two of their most iconic cars, lived on in other countries long after the production ended in their original home of Wolfsburg in Germany. You might also know about the City Golf, which was kind of a reproduction Mark I Golf that lived on in South Africa. But did you also know that our favourite platform, the Mark II, lived on as well? That's right, as far as 2013, the Mk2 Jetta lived on in China. I know that's a Golf, but it's just a Jetta without a boot, This is the story of the Mark II that lived, and the small company in China that to this day work hard to make sure it still does. Volkswagen's Golf was introduced in 1974 as a replacement for the aging but still very successful Beetle. 10 years later, they evolved it into the Mark II. From 1984, 1983 in Europe, but we're an Irish channel, and we got them in 1984 over here, so deal with it, to 1992, the second generation Golf became just as big a sensation as the Mark I before it, selling millions. Of course, yeah, that's the Golf, but what about the Jetta? Well, usually for the most part, the Jetta was just a Golf with a boot, and when you got a Golf, you got a new Jetta. Up until sort of the 90s and 2000s when things got a little bit complicated and they didn't quite, then there was a Bora and a Vento and fucking anyway. For some people, and I think here in Ireland especially, the Jetta was just considered to be an upmarket version of the Golf. Personally, not inclined to agree, but there's a Jetta in the background of a Carly Rae Jepsen video, whereas there's a Golf in the background of Trailer Park Boys, so take from that what you will. The Mark II Jetta was built alongside the Golf in the all-new factory in Wolfsburg for the Europe and export markets, unless, of course, you lived in the USA, which is where our story really begins. As you'd expect, it's pretty expensive to start shipping cars all the way from Wolfsburg in Germany over to the States, and Volkswagen thought much the same. Of course, that's not to mention the rise in grey imports, which was buying directly from the company in Germany, shipping it over to America, and saving a fortune on taxes. And that's why you Americans can't buy anything unless it's hit 25 years old. You can thank Mercedes-Benz for that one. Which is why Volkswagen bought over an old Chrysler assembly plant in Westmoreland, Pennsylvania back in the 70s, and in 1978 the first American people's car rolled off the assembly line. Base spec, 2-door Mark I Golf. Rabbit. Americans. This factory will go on to build the Mark I Golf, the Caddy, the Mark II platform and more. This was a very, very big deal. I mean, Volkswagen had never truly set foot in America before. And as they themselves said, this is one small step for man, but one giant step for Volkswagen. Unfortunately, due to dwindling sales and other ongoing issues, it would only be 10 years before Volkswagen would announce that the Westmoreland plant would be closing its doors. It's probably because of the stupid ugly headlights they were putting on their Golfs. Eventually, the Westmoreland plant was bought from Volkswagen by Sony. Of all people. In 1990 to 2008, Sony made TVs at the Westmoreland plant. But, as they say, as one door closes, another door opens. And that door just happened to be all the way on the other side of the world, past the Iron Curtain, and into China. The second part of our story then naturally moves to China, and with a company called First Automotive Works Group, or FAW for short, and as we'll call them for the rest of the video. Founded in 1953, FAW are more of a parent company that owned lots of smaller ones. Think of them like the Stellantis Group for China, likely with better door handles. Owned by the state of China itself, they started out with commercial vehicles, but when they made the move to standard passenger cars, they decided to enter the market of luxury cars. FAW were actually only the fourth brand from China to cooperate with Western car companies, which during the era of everybody badge engineering everything from Chrysler and Mitsubishi with the Conquest and the Stealth and all the rest, and every piece of shit that BL put out, it was actually a very, very big deal. They would also go on to do Toyota and I think GM in China as well, but I mean, that's getting ahead of ourselves. In 1990, after Sony had taken over the Westmoreland plant, and that is something I never thought I would say, a deal was struck between VW and FAW for an initial run of 150,000 cars. The wall had been down not 5 minutes and already the world was making friends. To do this, the Westmoreland plant was gutted out, with the body, paint and final assembly facilities all being shipped over to China to deck out their new home in Changchun, and I really hope I pronounced that properly. Eventually, they would go on to tackle Audi models as well. At last, in late '91, Volkswagen China had its first production car, the Mk2 Jetta. They started out as knockdown kits, which are basically model kits that were shipped in and just assembled in China before eventually being built there from scratch. Initially they just produced carbon copies of the Jetta, but eventually they would start being a little creative and create some of the most interesting versions of the A2 platform we would ever see, including a one-of-one prototype long wheelbase Jetta with an extended back door. As an aside, shameless self-promo, if you would like to show off some obscure Volkswagen knowledge, be sure to check out our new web store, 427motorsports.co.uk, where we will have printed merch, t-shirts, tote bags, fucking you name it. Each video will have its own theme and a themed t-shirt to go with it. This one, naturally, is made in China, so if you want to grab yourself a t-shirt with made in China written on it, but with a Mk2 Jetta on it, sure to confuse lots of Volkswagen people, check it out now. As you can probably imagine by the quality of the content, our videos aren't sponsored, so rather than have an ad for something completely unrelated like World of Tanks or some stupid shit like that, we wanted to bring you some of our own merch. Worldwide shipping, made to order. All of the proceeds go towards us making more adventure type videos, so we all win. Anyway, back to the show. In the beginning, things were nice and simple. They just kept making the Mk2 Jetta as it was, and all was well. Eventually, sales really started to pick up and they wanted to diversify the range a little bit. And how they diversified it was certainly spicy, shall we say. The first thing they did was known as the Jetta King, back in '97, same year I was born. And it's basically what happens when you drive a Mk2 Jetta at full speed into the back of a B4 Passat, and two become one. They even facelifted it to make it look a bit more like the Phaeton, which was Volkswagen's flagship at the time. Even up as far as 2007, demand for these was so high that they had to build another factory just for building them. It wasn't just on the outside that they modernised too. The interiors received a massive upgrade, well, depending on who you ask, I guess. Replacing the original boxy dash was the one from the Corrado, clocks from a Mark IV and a plethora of other changes. In 2010, we got what was called the Jetta Pioneer, which was nothing to do with head units or speakers. It was yet another external facelift, but really what was fascinating about these cars, above all the facelifts, was the actual mechanical differences. And fuck me. Okay, I'm warning you now, this part's about to get really nerdy, so if you're not super into Volkswagens, I'd understand if you just skip this part. Okay, I've actually grabbed a seat for this one, such is how nerdy it's about to get. When the Mk2 platform launched, you only really got a handful of engines. You got the base 1.3, there were a couple of 1.0s, but fucking good luck with that. You got your 1.6s, you got your 1.6 diesels, and then you got your 1.8s. GTIs were 1.8, but with a couple of different things, and Americans got a 2 litre, but that's because Americans are heavier, I guess. But a lot of these engines dated back as far as 1972. That base 4-cylinder block actually originated as a diesel, so needless to say that was not going to do for a car that was going on to 2012s. First things first, they dropped all of those diesel-derived big block engines from the original Mk2, the 1.6 to the 1.8, the EA 827 series, I want to say. They replaced those with the EA 113, I'm going to write it down below if I've got it wrong, which I think was in the Mark III, but it was a fuel injection model, so there were no more carburetors. But best of all, they took the 1.9 SDI from the Polo and stuck it into the Mark II. Later on down the line in 2009, they fitted the EA 111, which I know these things might mean nothing to you, but think of it this way. That same engine was in the Polo and the Mark IV Golf, which meant you could go into a dealership in China and buy a Mark II platform vehicle with a brand new Mark IV engine inside it. That blows my mind. But best of all, if you're mentally deranged like I am, that means somewhere in China there should be engine mounts that are factory fit to put a Mark IV engine setup into a Mark II. But that's where things only start to get interesting, because when you think about it, an engine is only a part of the puzzle. If you're into your Volkswagen Mark IIs, you'll know that in 1990, late 89, they went to a different electronic system called CE2, which means there are two types of Mark II Golf out there, CE1 and CE2. But after the Mark III came out, they then changed it in the Mark IV platform to a completely different setup. So if they're using Mark IV engines and Mark IV electronics, they must have to make that work with the CE2. So they have two options really. They completely rewire the Mark II to be completely Mark IV wiring, or they kind of mishmash the Mark IV stuff to work with CE2 stuff. So what did they do? Well, from what we can gather, information is extremely scarce, but it seems to be they managed to adapt the entire Mark IV engine management system to work with a Mark II CE2 setup. So you will have CE2 internals that then changed to Mark IV. But then by the time the later models came out, the Pioneer or whatever it was called, they even went to Mark IV dashes and everything. So they had to change absolutely everything about these cars. It's not just a resale anymore. It's a complete and utter different car. As we said, unfortunately, information on these cars is extremely scarce, and I spent a stupid amount of time trying to research this topic. Unfortunately, there haven't been any Chinese ones over here from what I can gather, so someday, fingers crossed, we might come across one that we can strip down and see what the differences are. If anybody wants to help with that, fucking fair play, but for now we'll just have to speculate. Today, the Mark II Jetta lives on as an absolute legend in China. Like the Beetle is to Mexico and Peugeot's to India, it'll forever be in their hearts. Sold in their millions and used as taxis, racking up countless miles, you'll struggle to find anyone in China that hasn't been in a Mark II Jetta at least once. But how do they keep these things on the road? Well, that's where we have to give a big thank you to Hancheng Classics in China. And no, it's Hancheng, not Wangcheng. There's no dance all days here. These guys have set up a company specifically restoring these Mark II Jettas. They keep them alive. They're the equivalent of Volkswagen Heritage over here, but in China. They also undertake full restorations and everything else. And then they have not sponsored us in any way, shape or form, but you know, they're the only people in the game, so there's not really a lot of advertising to be done, but these guys have single-handedly kept them alive. They also, you know, ship worldwide, so if there's any weird Jetta shit that you're interested in from this video, now that we've hopefully raised awareness of it, give them a shout and they might be able to import it over for you. Truth be told, we've known for a long time that they still made these things in China, but we had no idea just how different they were. We figured they just kept making the same car for years on end, but they really did try to advance it and further the A2 platform, and that's just amazing. Unfortunately, as we said, these are really, really scarce, so the chances of finding one over here are very slim, but if it ever happens, we promise we will get one and strip it down and show you the changes. So for now, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into this little corner of Volkswagen history that not many people have discovered. Thanks for watching, and good luck.